So in the last few weeks, we had an exciting release from the Veeam Intelligence team, and that was that Model Context Protocol server, the ability to use that really helpful assistant that sits inside our products, that leverages our cloud-based agents to pull on trusted data sources and blend it with your Veeam context to get those answers that suit your environment. How do I troubleshoot this, or what does this mean, or do I have any alarms in my environment, those operational tasks that you use every day. Now, previously, before this release, you had to use the assistant within the product, which has been fine because a lot of us as administrators of systems use those servers on every single day. But with MCP, that allows you to bring those agents, those smarts, those curated data sources to a client that you use and maybe are using for other tasks in your daily work, such as Claude Desktop. You can easily plug the Veeam Intelligence MCP server into that alongside your other MCP servers or other integrations or other skills to basically consolidate all of your work in one place, which is fantastic. Now, the way that the team has released this is a very quick clone of a public GitHub repository. You will then spin that up, and as long as you've got the Docker runtime engine running and you've configured the environment variables, you plug that into something like your client, such as Claude Desktop, and that will spin up those containers, and that runs locally. So every one of your workers or people consuming the Veeam Intelligence engine will basically have that flow. Now, the challenge, I suppose, is that's not shared in that you maybe now need to think about security implications of allowing multiple people to connect to the VBR instance, for example. But it also has the challenge of not being able to connect it to things like cloud-based or SaaS-based applications very easily. And so I wanted to sort of solve the great work that the Veeam Intelligence team have put in the underlying engine to make all this happen, and built a really thin wrapper that sits over top that allows you to centralize these Veeam Intelligence servers and also use a slightly different protocol to communicate, which allows us to have a shared server using, instead of the stdio protocol, it basically uses the streamable HTTP endpoints. So we can centrally host that. So I've put together a blog here on exactly that. I'm not going to read through the blog, obviously, but in essence, this is what it looks like. You can see on the left-hand side here, we've got SaaS or remote, such as Microsoft 365 Copilot. You can also connect up the same clients locally. So the local Claude Desktop or Visual Studio Code, anything else. Streamable is supported effectively on all MCP clients at this point in time. And then you can centrally host this wrapper here, and then that wrapper can have the ability to spin up the MCP servers on your behalf to whatever products you have. And this is obviously amplified if you have multiple VBR servers or multiple Veeam servers. And it certainly is amplified on the left-hand side too if you've got multiple clients. And then all of the normal magic happens from the Veeam Intelligence team. All of the AI agents enrich and contextualize your data and to give you back those very curated answers that you need from your environment. So if we take a quick look at, I guess, rewind here, what Veeam Intelligence does under the hood. So Veeam Intelligence here, this is an example of it in product. Obviously the question here, what alarms do I have and how can I resolve them? You ask that question, and that question actually gets sent up to those cloud services. And if the agents determine that it needs to get some real-world context, which in this case we do because it's asked, what alarms do I have and how can I resolve them? It will then securely ask your local client to query the local data sources, in this case the alarms, and it pushes them back up to the agents. And if there were alarms, and you've seen here in the purple, how can I resolve them? It will then go and search all of those custom trusted data sources that Veeam is curating on your behalf. What version, what do the alarms mean? All of the kind of knowledge base that we've built up over the years. And we're also refreshing this all the time with fresh content, fresh advisories, etc. And then what happens is, this is a very simplified view, is obviously the original question plus the trusted kind of content from our data sources that it's found and your context, so your alarms, get passed to our private Azure OpenAI model. So we're not running any public models here. There is a AI and security blog or page on our website for anyone that's concerned around the security of these, but it can't be used for like retraining purposes, etc. out on OpenAI. So secure as it can. And then post-processing happens, we clean it up, we make sure that it's ready for your client to receive, and then that answer goes back to your client, which is fantastic. You can see that within the product. So what happens is when we add the MCP server to it, I can now bring my laptop, and you can see that this one instance here, Veeam Intelligence MCP, is running with its Docker runtime there, and my Claude desktop in this case is talking and communicating with that. And then on that on our behalf there, it's brokering that conversation, that kind of bit in the middle that we just looked through. And we get the answers back to our client, and we can work with those answers or any of the artifacts that come back, tabular data, etc., to do whatever you want to with that inside of your laptop. And then what happens, of course, is if another person wants to consume this, they'll follow that same flow. So laptop 1 and laptop 2 here, exactly the same thing. They'll spin up those Docker containers locally, and they'll all centrally talk to, in this case, the Veeam 1 API as it needs to. And then, of course, this is looking at a single client again, but talking to multiple servers. So for every single server that you have upstream, such as a Veeam 1 and a VBR, or if there's 2 VBRs, your local client will spin up multiple versions of these processes. So you can see here I'm connecting to a Veeam 1 and a VBR, and there are two Docker containers that will be running, same code base, slightly different configuration, of course, because it's a different endpoint, potentially different credentials, and you also tell it what upstream API it's talking to, in this case a VBR or a Veeam 1. And your computer just works with this, or your client just works with this absolutely fine. And your large language model of choosing will route the requests to those relevant upstream servers and use those MCP servers as they see fit, and the tools that sit within them. So what this wrapper does that we're talking about here is it centralizes that MCP side of things. So you can see that same laptop now just talks to a wrapper that is hosted potentially centrally or somewhere securely in your environment. It supports authentication, so you can pass a bearer token for authentication, so it's not just completely open. So this might be securely sitting within your network, and that laptop then can connect to that wrapper. That wrapper on the behalf, again, will just talk to Veeam 1 and VBR as it sees fit. The great thing with this is because it's now streamable, you can work out a way to securely expose these endpoints or route them through some infrastructure that you have in Azure, and expose them to something like Microsoft 365 Copilot. And because Copilot supports streamable endpoints, but it doesn't support the sort of local Docker runtime, you can now get something like Copilot to also talk to this wrapper, again with that same authentication on there, not advocating that you expose this to the internet. Work out a way that you can securely get a Microsoft 365 environment to connect to these endpoints, and then that works. And the beautiful thing is you can keep stacking this at this point. So now I've got two, say, SaaS or remote servers here. It could be all 3 laptops on the side here. You can mix or match all of this. Basically, any client that can connect to a streamable endpoint will support connecting to this wrapper. Okay, so if we look now at some examples of this. So this is a Microsoft 365 Copilot. You will come in once you've worked out how to route to this and go add a tool. And then inside of here, there is a Model Context Protocol button. This is where you'll give it your server name. So my wrapper for Veeam Intelligence. You need to give it a description, one of these, so you can identify that within your environment. And this is the endpoint. It needs to be longer. Thanks, Microsoft. So server URL, this is where you'll type in, my, say, vi wrapper dot internal dot domain. Oop, can't type this morning. And for authentication, the server does support no authentication if you don't provide a key. I highly recommend that you at least have one of these. And what you'll type in here is bearer and then your secure kind of token here. Click create, and then what will happen is it will connect, and it will be available down here as an example. So now you'll see that it's loading these tools in real time, and what will happen is I will see my VBR upstream, which is pretty great. And then what happens is we can use that within Copilot. So what I've actually done here, and what you will have seen in the demonstration video, is we used Claude to connect to ServiceNow, because this is where the power really comes in. When you can connect multiple upstream MCP servers or multiple integrations with that Veeam context, you can do some pretty powerful things. So as an example here, I said, do I have any alarms? And it said, yes, you do. And it gave me a really good summary of them. And I said, great, log a ServiceNow ticket, just one ticket for all of the alarms, but you could also get it to log multiple tickets, which you imagine the time saving here. And you can see it's pulled back all the alarms on this particular environment and plugged them into ServiceNow for now someone to deal with. But the great thing with Copilot is it's got a lot of like these native integrations. So you can see here I've turned them off, but I've connected it up to Planner. Here's our ServiceNow integration. Here's it connecting to Excel. You can connect it to SharePoint. Lots of other things. In fact, if we load up these tools here, you'll see there's lots of different connectors here that are official connectors from, say, Microsoft, sort of other integrations for working with things like Jira, and then a big kind of ecosystem of other connectors that other companies have made, which is pretty cool. So you can start adding lots of tools here to get it to do lots of things. So why don't we query our Veeam 1 alarms? And one common thing you might want to do is email them through to, so if we load this up, so let's say, what are we saying here? Show me my current triggered alarms with a status area, object name, object type, and add the mapping to the MITRE techniques and procedures. With the mappings, convert it to a clean HTML format for use with Outlook, create a draft email and send it to this address, and now raise the security now incident single with the recommendations. The great thing is we've also got a list of prompts that you can kind of use to get started. So on our website here, veeam.com/Veeam Intelligence prompts.html, you will come in here and you can actually see a bunch of prompts to get you started. So here's this one that we used effectively to map our alarms and things, warnings within our environment to MITRE, check if VM names are protected with an RPO, 3 concerns. There's a lot of things in here that you can use to kind of get started to think about how you could use Veeam Intelligence in different ways. If we go back to our Copilot now, you'll see this generating out the alarms. You can see this is now talking with this server on the left-hand side. So you can actually see here's a list of the current alarms. So that's already been returned from the Veeam Intelligence side. On the right-hand side here, the Copilot is now thinking about all this data it got back from our Veeam Intelligence engine. And in a second here, we'll see this kind of generate a response inside the window. So let's wait for this to return and we'll come back in a second. So everything's returned now. You can see that it asked me if I did in fact want to connect to Outlook. I hadn't done this session, so it's asked me my authorization to do that, which is great. And you'll see after that it then gave us this response back with all of that information. Looks a bit kind of squished inside of this Copilot window just because we're in the debug view. But you can see the really rich information that got returned back. All of the data and mapped to MITRE, etc. And then right at the bottom, basically it said that it did everything now. On the left-hand side, you can see that it drafted an email and that was successful. And it also created another ServiceNow record because the last part of that is basically a 2-step action. I said, generate the summary, get me all the mappings, and then draft an email and send it to that email address and raise a ServiceNow ticket. So if I go back here, you'll see we were at this one here. Now we've got this second ServiceNow ticket. And if I load that out, here's all that information. And you could obviously work out the different formats that you want for ServiceNow to make that, maybe work a bit better with inside ServiceNow in terms of the format that it supports. And if I go across to my draft emails, you'll now see one has been raised here. And if I load that up, there's a beautiful HTML email report. Again, this information was all sourced from Veeam Intelligence remotely. It was brought in and it was, massaged effectively with our agents, and you can customize exactly what you want it to do there. And it's converted all that to an HTML format that's friendly with Outlook, and it's created that email that's ready now for a security team to review. And you imagine the other use cases. You could have this logging into something like a knowledge base, creating internal KB articles, Even generating things like PowerPoint using Copilot, or even things like Claude Desktop can create great assets now as well. So I'm really excited to see you utilize Veeam Intelligence, whatever mode that you use it in. Remember, the wrapper that I've put is here. It's open source. It's available online. So I'll drop the link along the bottom here. But whatever mode you use it in, whether or not it's that local mode, if we go back to the blog article here, whether or not it's that local mode that you're using just to spin up Docker containers within those clients, because that's what suits you. Fantastic. You can achieve all of these same things. But if you want to extend it and maybe have different ways you can connect in, maybe think about also blending in this streamable wrapper here, so that you can start using some different tools and different services, or centralize the usage. Either way, the heavy lifting's all been done by the Veeam Intelligence team. There's no changes to that code base. It is just a thin wrapper that sits over top and leverages their fantastic work of bringing Veeam Intelligence to a client near you.